This is Power Hour with Gabriella Power.
Hello and welcome to Power Hour. I'm Gabriella Power. Thank you for joining us. We have a big show coming up. Donald Trump slams Ilhan Omar. Democrat Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro unleashes on Kamala Harris, claiming what she wrote about him in her book was BS. And there are growing concerns over the UK's border controls. But first, in news that should shock absolutely no one, trust in the media is at a record low. Just 28% of Americans say they have a great deal or fair amount of trust in the mass media. 28%. Back in the 70s, it used to be 68%. So we've been seeing the decline in real time for some time now, and it seems like mainstream media outlets have no intention of even trying to gain trust back. I mean, the same outlets that told us that Joe Biden was 100% fine is now putting out articles that say this guy is suffering fatigue. Of all things you want to go after Donald Trump for, I mean, his energy is unmatched. But that hasn't stopped the New York Times from claiming that Donald Trump is struggling to sustain his energy and he's showing signs of fatigue. I mean, what BS? That story couldn't be more fake and couldn't be more obviously fake. You know, Trump has held as many cabinet meetings in the space of 10 months than Joe Biden did in 4 years, but the mainstream media won't be telling you that. Democrats, they love the mass media. People like Barack Obama, they think the media is doing a great job. They don't want to see any changes, and they want you to keep trusting ABC, CNN, and the New York Times.
Is there one outlet out there that you would consider the least bias, sort of the most straight news?
Here's the thing. I actually think that the mainstream news still does a very good job of just presenting facts.
Oh, really? If that was true, the trust in the media would not be at such a record low. And just look at this year, for example. I mean, it took the mainstream media weeks to start covering the shocking murder of Irina Zavrutska. They didn't want to cover it. When it came to Charlie Kirk's assassination, we had Jimmy Kimmel deliberately lie about the alleged assassin, saying he was a MAGA person. And now new polling shows that only 24% of voters know that Charlie Kirk's alleged assassin was a radical leftist. And the people watching the America ABC News, well, they've been led to believe that this alleged murderer was a big, hopeless romantic.
It was very touching in a way that I think many of us didn't expect. A very intimate portrait into this relationship between the suspect's roommate and the suspect himself, with him repeatedly calling his roommate who was transitioning, calling him my love, and I want to protect you, my love.
If you're a Power Hour viewer in the USA and your debt, fees and calls are piling up monthly, it's time to fight back. PDS Debt has helped hundreds of thousands cut debt and put money back in their pockets, not the banks. Whether you're struggling with credit cards, personal loans or medical bills, PDS Debt offers custom options to help you get out of debt. They go beyond the numbers to understand your financial situation and craft a personalised plan designed for you. With no minimum credit score required, they're here to help you save more, pay off debt faster, and start putting money back where it belongs, in your pockets. PDS Debt is A+ rated by the Better Business Bureau, boasts thousands of 5-star reviews on Google, and holds a 5-star rating on Trustpilot. Why? Because PDS has helped hundreds of thousands of people get out of debt. Every month you wait costs more in interest and fees. The best time to start was yesterday, and the second best time is right now. For our brilliant Power Hour viewers in America, this is a great product to consider. Don't wait another month. Take back control in 30 seconds. Get your free personalised assessment and the best option for you at pdsdebt.com/power. That's pdsdebt.com/power. pdsdebt.com/power. Joining us now is our panel, writer and broadcaster Esther Kraku and Signal principal and pollster Nick Weinstein. Thank you so much for joining us. Let's start with Donald Trump. He's blasted Ilhan Omar and her friends. Let's take a listen to him.
You know, our country's at a tipping point. We could go bad. We're at a tipping point. I don't know if people mind me saying that, but I'm saying it. We could go one way or the other. And we're going to go the wrong way if we keep taking in garbage into our country. Ilhan Omar is garbage. She's garbage. Her friends are garbage. These aren't people that work. These aren't people that say, let's go, come on, let's make this place great. These are people that do nothing but complain. They complain. And from where they came from, they got nothing. You know, they came from paradise, and they said, this isn't paradise. But when they come from hell, and they complain and do nothing but we don't want them in our country. Let them go back to where they came from and fix it.
Esther, now this comes after the revelations of the massive fraud scandal in Minnesota, mostly involving people from the Somalia community. Now, Donald Trump is, of course, getting criticism for his language. The media's in meltdown over his comments, but we know garbage is a word we've heard before from Joe Biden. He used that just last year. Esther, what do you make of President Trump there?
Now, of course, President Trump has a very unique way of expressing himself, probably the most unpresidential you've ever seen. But of course, you know, Joe Biden used similar language last year. So I think if you're going to, you know, feign moral outrage over this, you kind of have to be even-handed in this. And look, I think Trump has his advantage of the fact that we know who he is, we know how he speaks. The media having a meltdown over something Donald Trump has said before is old news. So it doesn't really sting in the same way that you would think. But on the point of to be quite critical of, you know, to examine critically what he was saying, the Somali community in America is quite unique in the sense that you have over, I believe, 200,000 that have mainly come since the 1990s, following the civil war in Somalia, that are kind of a unique immigrant group in the U.S. in the sense that their economic activity is relatively low. They overwhelmingly claim state handouts and benefits. And this, you know, scandal in Minnesota, this fraud scandal, involved over $1 billion that was funneled to fake organizations, and that money found its way to Al-Shabaab, which is literally an Islamist terrorist group in Somalia. These individuals used, you know, fake children and fake autistic children in particular to claim all sorts of, you know, financial benefits from the state of Minnesota. And it happened on Tim Walz's watch. And I'm pretty sure there are many people now that are thanking the Lord that this man didn't manage to become the vice president of the United States. So, you know, trying to just look past the usual outrage over what Donald Trump said, there is actually merit to what he said. He didn't, you know, there are many immigrant groups in the US, like, you know, Chinese Americans, like Nigerian Americans, who in terms of scholastic attainment, in terms of income, in terms of actual work ethic, in terms of how much they claim from benefits, is a lot lower than the Somali community. And that's not racist to point out. The kind of people you absorb into your country dictate what kind of country you want, not just now, but in the future as well. Because these people end up having kids, their culture or their inability to assimilate also affects the broader mainstream culture. So I think it's important to look at what Donald Trump said critically. And instead of, you know, picking at what he's saying and feigning moral outrage, look at actually the fraud cases that have happened with this community and asking why so many of them seem to be happy not working and claiming state handouts.
Nick, I want to get your thoughts on that as well. And of course, the media goes after what Donald Trump says, even when the media covered the fraud scandal in Minnesota, they were again focusing on what Donald Trump said about Tim Walz as opposed to what actually happened under Tim Walz's watch, which is, of course, more than $1 billion of taxpayers' money was not going where it's supposed to. It was going to funding lavish lifestyles, going overseas, going to potentially going to a Somali terrorist organization. Can I get your reaction?
Yeah, I agree with everything that Esther said. I mean, this is a massive fraud that's been perpetrated. And I think, you know, part of the frustration from everyday Americans is that, you know, everyday Americans are told, you know, do things right, work hard, and, you know, the government will be there as a backstop if things get bad. They're not taking advantage of these type of government handouts. And when you see this massive fraud being perpetrated, you know, that's taking money that's intended for, you know, in one case, I think it was $300 million. It was intended for children suffering from autism. It's taking money out of the hands of folks that actually need it. And especially in light of the awful attack involving another refugee from a Muslim community here in Washington, D.C., I think it's not surprising that there's renewed focus on enforcing our immigration laws and scrutinizing some of these more insular communities, particularly given the ties to terrorism that have been reported, with some of this money being sent back to Somalia and going to Al-Shabaab, an Al-Qaeda affiliated terror group.
Nick, I want to get your thoughts on the special election yesterday. Republican nominee Matt Van Epps, he defeated Democratic rival Afton Bain in the high-stakes special election in Tennessee. This, of course, was a must-win for Republicans, but can you take us through the results? What do you make of them?
Yeah, so this is a district in Tennessee that President Trump won by 22 points, obviously a safely Republican district. And Matt Van Epps won it, but by a significantly closer margin than the president won it. And there are going to be folks on both sides that are going to look at those results and they're going to be concerned. And, I'm a little bit nervous, but not any more so than I was after the elections in November. Special elections, particularly ones in early December, they're weird, they're low turnout affairs. And what we've seen time and time again is that the Democrats are way more energized right now than the Republicans are. And when a very small fraction of the electorate's voting, even in a seat that's as conservative as the one in Tennessee, it's not surprising that the Democrats are going to outperform expectations. But it really does, give us the playbook for what we need to do next year, which is to execute an agenda that works for the American people and that energizes those folks that aren't always engaged politically, but voted for President Trump, that gets them off the couch to vote for Republican nominees.
And Esther, I want to get your thoughts on Afton Bain, who of course lost the special election, but looking at her, it's being argued that she's really the median Democrat here. She's of course a lunatic, radical progressive, and they're the people that the Democrats continue to run. She was defund the police. She said she even hated Tennessee. On another point, I was listening to Jesse Watters yesterday, and he was running through all the hoaxes that the Democrats have been running this year. We had the Maryland dad hoax, the Iranian nuclear mountain hoax, the illegals don't get free healthcare hoax, the MAGA killed Charlie Kirk hoax, and that Elon Musk is stealing our social security hoax, and the Antifa isn't real hoax. I mean, this is what their messaging has been like this year, and then they're putting up candidates like Afton Bain. Are they going to continue to do that?
I think, unfortunately, for the Republicans, I think as crazy as candidates like Afton Bain, who has the misfortune of having a name that sounds like a venereal disease, but we can't really talk very much because in Britain we had a politician called Ed Balls. So these things happen. I think they are learning in the sense that they're fielding the most ridiculous candidates, but they're learning about what actually resonates. So in a district where, Mr. Green won by 20 points, Donald Trump won by 22 points, you really should question why in just, a little over a year, the new Republican candidate only won by 9 points against a candidate who is, for all intents and purposes, fits better in New York and in coastal cities than in a very deep red district like in Tennessee. So what is happening here is that the Democrats are realizing that economic populism, especially harping on about the cost of living, is what's actually resonating with people. And the Republicans have to be very careful because, as Bill Clinton said, it's the economy, stupid. If people don't feel like their money is going further or feel like the economy is in safe hands like Donald Trump promised, you are going to see people looking towards really unsavory candidates like Afton Bain, because outside of the whole culture war stuff, which I think the Democrats know that they've decisively lost and that they have to kind of move away from that and talk about issues that directly affect people's lives, like the money in their pockets and the economy and jobs and all of that, then you start to see a shift, because Afton Bain, for all intents and purposes, should not have been able to have come within the sort of close range that she did with Van Epps. But the fact that she did that shows that there are some lessons that need to be learned by the Republicans and fast, because if not, they're going to lose their already fragile majority in the House, and Trump's agenda will effectively be neutralized from that point onwards. And we cannot see that happening because who knows what untold damage basically halting his agenda would do, especially at the next presidential election.
Absolutely. It's an important point. Look, it's been revealed that Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro has unleashed on Kamala Harris. He sat down for an interview where he really unleashed about what Kamala Harris wrote about him in her book. He said that it was utter BS. This was in an interview with The Atlantic. And Josh Shapiro denied what Harris alleged in her book, 107 Days, which included discussions of Shapiro and others that she vetted to be her running mate. And then she landed with Tim Walz, which was an absolute disaster. But Josh Shapiro said, I can tell you that her accounts are just blatant lies. Nick, this book, 107 Days, it just keeps infuriating the Democrats.
Yeah, I mean, Kamala Harris continues on her self-immolation tour here. This is someone who was, uniquely unqualified to run for president, got in there under the unique circumstances of, President Biden dropping out of the race. And it goes to show just how lucky we are to have dodged this bullet as a country, because clearly this is someone who doesn't have the temperament to lead the country going forward. And I think really what this shows and is endemic of is the fact that the Democrats are still, in search of a leader for their party here. And, Kamala Harris is trying to continue to establish herself and to distance herself from the failure that was her presidential campaign. But my goodness, making every other up and coming Democrat angry and trying to throw folks like Josh Shapiro under the bus, who have a much better reputation than she does right now. I don't know that that's the way to do it.
Esther, it's been a big year. I want to get your thoughts. Looking back at 2025, we've covered some pretty crazy media meltdowns here on Power Hour. But looking back at 2025, the year that's been, what would you say was the craziest moment?
I would say Rachel Zegler and her inability to sue her jaw shut, especially with hundreds of millions of dollars and people's jobs on the line. I think that kind of spectacular narcissism and an ego the size of Kansas is really a sight to behold. I mean, in a parallel universe where we actually cared what a 23-year-old girl thought about anything to do with Trump or climate change or Gaza, I think she would have done quite well. But unfortunately, most people happen to live in reality, and they know that at 23, they could hardly boil pasta. So probably listening to the opinions of a girl who's too selfish and narcissistic to keep her mouth shut for the sake of not just the film that she's promoting, which a lot of people invested a lot of money in, but for the sake of her co-stars and all the people behind the scenes in production who had a lot riding on it. It's quite spectacular, and I think it really deserves some sort of Hall of Fame moment, because you don't really see that very often.
Let's just take a listen to her.
No longer 1937.
She's not going to be saved by the prince.
She's not going to be saved by the prince, and she's not going to be dreaming about true love. She's dreaming about becoming the leader she knows she can be, and the leader that her late father told her that she could be if she was fearless, fair, brave, and true. The original cartoon came out in 1937, and very evidently so. There's a big focus on her love story with a guy who literally stalks her. Yeah. Weird. So we didn't do that this time.
Yeah, the Snow White absolutely slammed over this, just so woke, such a disaster. Nick, are you able to top that? What was your craziest kind of media meltdown?
I think back to the meltdown over Jimmy Kimmel and his brief suspension from the Late Show. He made some inaccurate comments after the shooting of Charlie Kirk, but the breathless mainstream media and Hollywood freakout was proclaiming, an end to free speech. And, as an example of, President Trump's, fascist takeover of America. But it's a tough look for the liberal resistance movement when, Trump, the president of the United States, arguably the most powerful person in the world, can't even keep a comedian he likes off the air for a little bit more than a week. Just an excellent example of the rhetoric of the left not matching up to the reality of the moment.
Let's just take a listen to Jimmy Kimmel.
I don't think what I have to say is going to make much of a difference. If you like me, you like me. If you don't, you don't. I have no illusions about changing anyone's mind. But I do want to make something clear because it's important to me as a human, and that is you understand that it was never my intention to make light of the murder of a young man. I don't think there's anything funny about it. I posted a message on Instagram on the day he was killed, sending love to his family and asking for compassion, and I meant it, and I still do. nor was it my intention to blame any specific group for the actions of what it was obviously a deeply disturbed individual. That was really the opposite of the point I was trying to make, but I understand that to some that felt either ill-timed or unclear, or maybe both. And for those who think I did point a finger, I get why you're upset. If the situation was reversed, there's a good chance I'd have felt the same way.
Nick, he is such a liar. I mean, it's so infuriating just listening to him. And, you know, it's actually come out today that new polling shows only 24% of voters actually know that Charlie Kirk's alleged killer was a radical leftist. And it's because of people like Jimmy Kimmel that were deliberately lying, saying that it was a MAGA person. I mean, it was just absurd. And then the fake tears and refusing to apologise to Charlie Kirk's family was just awful. Esther, while we're looking back at the year that was, winner or loser? Do you have any winner or loser for the year?
I would say definitely the winner is the ghost of Jeffrey Epstein, the most infamous sexual offender the world has ever known, because he managed to stay in the headlines longer being dead than when he was alive and abusing scores of women. And he was a headache to not only the Republicans, but I suspect the Democrats, if the Democrats would decide to actually be fair-handed about this and acknowledge that there were quite a few powerful men within their own ranks that were sashaying on Epstein Island. So yeah, that's definitely a winner, I would say.
And Nick, what about you? Winner or loser?
I think a big loser this year has been Chuck Schumer, the leader of the Senate Democrats. He came into the year trying to balance the anger of his progressive base with the job of actually legislating and leading the country. And for years and years, this is someone who's insisted that shutting down the government is irresponsible. But as soon as he felt the heat from his liberal base, he led Democrats into the longest shutdown in history, while simultaneously refusing and infuriating liberals in his own state by refusing to endorse progressive darling Zohran Mamdani. In the end, he looked incredibly foolish. The shutdown went on for 42 days, and Democrats within his own party broke from his leadership and voted with Republicans to reopen the government. So not only did he go through the heartburn of shutting down the government, he got nothing in return and really had egg on his face coming out of that process. And I'm sure he's feeling the heat from within his own party as they enter what is going to be a really difficult cycle for Democrats to pick up seats in the Senate.
Absolutely. Esther, I know you cover the royals for us as well, so I have to get your thoughts on Meghan Markle's new Netflix Christmas special. It's been torn apart by critics. Some have given it a 0 or even 1 star, calling it quite mad and a little bit sad. Does not surprise me one bit. Can I get your thoughts?
It was like a form of Chinese torture. And I say this as someone who's painstakingly watched everything she's put out, because this is what I do for you, fellow viewers. But I cannot overstate how devoid she is of a personality. All her guests, which she seems to be really friendly with, are just people that are trotted on, apparently are close friends, but she doesn't know anything about them. She doesn't explain anything, which as someone who loves cooking and lifestyle stuff, I find very frustrating. She doesn't explain the flavor profile of a lot of the ingredients she uses. And she's always kind of like, oh yeah, I just threw this together. But it's also like, okay, but can you explain it? But I think the one shining light in this latest Christmas special is that Prince Harry managed to chew through his leash just in time to make an appearance, and actually said something witty about an anti-salad which featured beetroot and anchovies, which I have to agree with him on this occasion. But it's just very unentertaining. It's very bland. The episodes are too long. The music, I mean, honestly, whoever put together the score really has a vendetta against Meghan Markle. I'm convinced, like a drunk DJ at a wedding, and it's just unwatchable. And I have a feeling that Netflix are definitely not going to renew this after this sorry attempt to make Meghan Markle a Martha Stewart.
Yeah, I think a lot of people hate watching that program if they're watching it at all. Esther Kraku and Nick Weinstein, thank you so much for joining us. If you're a homeowner in America, you need to listen to this. The FBI has been warning about a type of real estate fraud on the rise called title theft, and your equity is the target. Here's how it works. Criminals forge your signature on a single document, use a fake notary stamp and file it with the county. And just like that, on record, they own your home. Using your ownership, they can take out loans against your equity or even sell your property, and you won't know about it until foreclosure or collection notices show up in the mail. That's why I've partnered with Home Title Lock, so you can protect your equity and find out today if you're already a victim. Use my promo code POWER at hometitlelock.com. You'll get a free title history report and a free trial of their $1 million triple lock protection. That's 24/7 monitoring of your title records, urgent alerts to any changes, and if fraud occurs, their US-based restoration team will spend up to $1 million to fix it. Don't be a victim. Protect your equity today. That's hometitlelock.com, promo code POWER, or use the link below. Well, there's fresh anger over the UK's border controls after it's been revealed a single people smuggling gang has sent more migrants back to France than the Labor government has managed through its official return scheme. Joining us now is IPA Research Fellow Mia Schlicht. Mia, great to see you again. Talk to us about these revelations and reports that a smuggling gang has returned more migrants to France than Keir Starmer.
Yeah, it's great to be back with you, but the reality is, and here in Australia we know this very well, that when it comes to people smugglers, if there's any kind of weakness in the border, they will find that weakness and they'll start running an operation out of that. And that's why it was so important here in Australia that under John Howard's leadership and Tony Abbott's leadership, they got that under control. But the problem in the UK is it basically has an open borders policy. Everywhere around there is a weak point, and Starmer has been completely unable to get this under control. But I'm in no way here supporting people smugglers at all, but it does just show that where there is a will, there is a way. And I think when it comes down to Starmer, he doesn't have the will, whether that's because he's unable to crack down on illegal immigration or it's because he's ideologically opposed to doing so. I'm not sure. I think it might be a case of a bit of both going on here. He's just completely unable to get that under control, and that's causing a world of pain for those in the UK. And it's why we're seeing so many leave, because they are just sick and tired of not having their own interests put first. And instead you've got Starmer, who is obsessed with playing the globalist games and is unable to crack down on both illegal migration and legal migration.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, let's talk about the controversy of tax rises. Ministers say that Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves misled the cabinet by justifying tax rises. Talk to us about what they said. We know that Reeves repeatedly cited weaker productivity forecasts, including at a meeting she held where she hinted the basic rate of income tax would be going up. And she told ministers that Britain faced challenges in the forms of tariffs, unstable borrowing costs, inflation and long-term productivity. And she said she had to respond to the world as it is now. I mean, that's one way to justify putting taxes up.
Well, yeah, I have no doubt here that they absolutely misled the cabinet, but I think worse than that is they misled the public. This was a fundamentally socialist budget that the UK public never voted for, they never wanted to, and now they're the ones paying the ultimate price for that. It's pretty clear the reason why they raised taxes, and it's because unfortunately the UK seems to be following the path of Latin America, whereby they're raising taxes so that investors don't flee, because investors aren't going to invest if they don't have faith the country is going to be able to repay the debt. So that's the reason why they've done it. But if you take one look at Latin America, that is a terrible decision to make. It just leads to absolutely terrible outcomes. Now, unfortunately, that's where the UK is at. They will be paying for this. What the Western world doesn't seem to understand is the only way to raise living standards is by growing the economy. And that's something that Trump does understand, but it's the only one in the Western economy who's actually doing something about it, because he understands that if with a bigger economy comes a larger tax revenue, that's the only way to raise living standards. And what this budget just shows is that both Reeves and Starmer, they don't get it. They don't understand it. And until there is a drastic course correction and they get back on track here, I think speculation over leadership spills that will continue to rise, because I don't see how they can continue down this path.
And let's look at Reform UK leader, I should say, Nigel Farage. He's denying claims that he's planning some kind of election pact with the Conservatives, despite some donors saying that he's told them a deal with the Tories is inevitable. So reports suggest that he's floated everything from cooperation to a full mega party merger. But Farage insists he'd only ever consider a reverse takeover, saying he won't do a deal with a party he does not trust. Mia, what do you make of this? Do you think that there will be a deal to come?
Yeah, look, I've said this before. Farage is an incredible leader. He's a once-in-a-generation talent. He's incredibly unique, and he has achieved something that I don't think anyone expected him to achieve in the first place. But there is a problem here about continuing the momentum, and there are some administrative challenges that Farage, realistically, he does have to face, and that is such as running good, solid candidates in all the seats that he needs to put candidates in. I think that's going to be a real challenge for him, and that's why I think he has made these statements about absorbing people who want to defect from the Tory party. He's willing to take them on, and I can understand why he's saying that, because he does need to address those administrative challenges. However, I think it would be a real shame if that deal was to go any further than that. I do not think Reform should do any kind of deal with the Tories, because realistically, the Tories are still lost at sea. They have no idea what they stand for. They have no idea what they're doing. And it shows a real lesson, especially for the Liberal Party here in Australia, that when you're a party who has a message for everyone, you have a message for no one. We saw the Tories triumph net zero. They refused to crack down on immigration. They did nothing to solve the cost of living crisis. And as a result, they completely lost their base. And I think we're seeing the same problem here happen in Australia, where people want a leader who stands for something and stands for them, and that's Farage. So I think Farage should continue what he's doing. He needs to sort out those logistics, but I don't think he should do a deal with the Tories.
Finally, while we're speaking about what's happening in Europe, Vladimir Putin says that Russia doesn't want a war with Europe, but claims it's ready if European powers choose one. He's accused EU leaders of blocking Trump's attempts to end the war in Ukraine, saying they've pushed proposals they know Moscow would reject, just so they can paint Russia as unwilling to talk. Putin also says Europe has locked itself out of peace talks by cutting off direct contact with the Kremlin. Let's take a listen to him.
We're not planning to go to war with Europe. I have already spoken about this 100 times. But if Europe suddenly wants to go to war with us and starts, we're ready right now.
Mia, can I get your assessment?
Well, look, Putin says a lot of things all the time. I'm not sure. He's a bit of the boy who cries wolf, wolf, so it's hard to know what we can believe that comes out of his mouth there. But it does raise an important question. Russia's ready. Is Europe ready to defend itself? Absolutely not. The UK is certainly not ready to defend itself. Australia is certainly not ready to defend itself if a war was to come across our shores. In fact, in Australia, we have never been less prepared for a conflict since World War II, and that's extremely worrying. And we're seeing with these peace talks that, well, Trump, first of all, should absolutely be congratulated for at least trying to achieve some kind of peace deal here. He's the only one actually doing anything. We've got Europe is full of these weak leaders who sit there criticising everyone else, but they refuse to sort out what's happening in their own backyards. So they're sitting back, they're letting Trump carry the heavy load here. And I think there is some kind of presumption that if there was a conflict to break out, that Trump would once again carry the heavy load with everyone's defence systems. Well, that's just not true, because Trump's made it pretty clear that everyone needs to start pulling their weight when it comes to defence. And in Europe, there just seems a complete lack of motivation to do so, and that is very, very terrifying.
Mia, we have to talk about this book on Daniel Andrews. This new book out this week takes aim at the social and economic fallout of Australia's most controversial premier, The Dark Legacy of Daniel Andrews. It argues the former Victorian premier reshaped the state through centralised power, ideological decision-making and sweeping policy overreach 100%, also weakening democratic norms, blowing out debt and eroding basic freedoms. I mean, this really couldn't be a more important book, or an important look at Daniel Andrews, and certainly a fair bit of damage that he caused Victoria, caused Australia. Spent plenty of press conferences with Daniel Andrews back in 2020. Mia, can you give us a sense of this book and what it looks into?
Well, yeah, unfortunately, it's a topic that I think very many Victorians want to leave behind them. We don't like talking about Daniel Andrews. If it was up to us, we'd prefer to never mention his name again. But the unfortunate reality is that whilst he's not Premier, Daniel Andrews still rules the lives of many Victorians. And that's due to his legacy that he left from his time running this dictatorship across the state. And we launched this book at an IPA event last night. Peter Credlin did a fantastic job launching the book for us. And the unfortunate reality is that so many people still are affected by the decisions that were made by Daniel Andrews. He really did corrupt every single sector of the state, whether that was the public service, whether that was giving his mates jobs in the public service, whether that was the complete control he had over the media. Daniel Andrews really did run this state like a dictator, and many people came to this realization during the pandemic that that's who he was. But the reality is that the pandemic didn't create Daniel Andrews. It just revealed who he truly is. And the power that he set up behind the scenes in the years building up to the pandemic, that is an incredibly important story to tell, because in order to unravel all the damage he's done, we have to understand how we got there, so we can just see the extent of how much of that system is rotten and how much of it needs to be reformed.
Yeah, no, it's so important. You know, I speak to people in Melbourne all the time, whether it's parents with young children, small business owners, still really feeling the impacts because of Daniel Andrews' decision-making. Mia Slicht, we have to leave it there. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
That is Power Hour. Thank you for your company. We'll see you next week. Make sure you subscribe to Sky News Australia on YouTube.